I sometimes wonder what it says about a person when they're willing to completely change direction. Not once, not twice, but every single decade of their life. Listeners, most of us cling to the first path we choose. It's the only safe branch on the tree. But every now and then you meet someone who keeps leaping gracefully, deliberately into entirely new forests. Today's guest did exactly that. She started chasing rhinos and orangutans through the bush with DNA kits, then taught the next generation. Then, at 37, walked into law school with zero legal background, built a rock solid in house career in science and health. And now at 49, she's back in the conservation world, this time as General Counsel for WWF Singapore, while running her own company that brings senior legal brains to organizations that cannot afford a full time GC. Listeners, this isn't a story about having it all. It is a story about repeatedly letting go of all to pick up something that matters more in that season of life. Listeners, meet my incredible guest, Natasha Raina, on BizBlend. And as always, I'm your host, Sana. So let's get into this conversation. Natasha, welcome to BizBlend. I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Not a problem, Sana. I'm excited to be here as well. I've listened to your show. I love the audience. I love the topics, and it was a privilege.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And I must say, um, wow. You had no background in legal and you walked into the law school. That definitely that needs a lot of courage, and at the same time it also, I think, needs a bit of vulnerability as well. So we'll explore that in the conversation. But to begin with, Natasha, most people who leave science for law do it early. Sometimes I also get to know from many people when I right now think about that. I must do something new, but then many people tell me that now it's not the right time because now you are in kind of that midlife and all, so
Mm-hmm.
not meet the standards or the expectations. But you you were 37, you already had a career in conservation genetics and fieldwork across 4 countries. What actually made you think law school? How did you begin? Did you begin with an action plan or you just went yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny, Sana. I sometimes also believe in divine intervention. You are absolutely where you need to be at every season in your life. I think most of us, you know when something's not right in your life, right? People sometimes ask me, "How did you know?" And I said, actually, I think we all know. We all know. It's just, do we listen? Right? Do we listen to ourselves? Do we listen to what our gut is saying? Do we listen to what our heart is saying? And so for me, it was, I was in conservation for about 10 over years. I decided to come back, move closer to family, as it always is, right? Decided to move closer to family. And, the only roles at the time in Asia, in Singapore specifically, in this conservation space, I guess, was, to work in the zoo, to maybe be a zookeeper. This was 20 years ago, Sana. This was before the green movement even, right? It hadn't even come to Asia. There were pockets of conservation organizations, but nothing, sophisticated in the sense of, doing research and science and things like that. So I came back and I was teaching. I was a teacher in a polytechnic. So I think the kids were about maybe 17 to 19 years old. And with my colleagues one day, right? And one of my friends, a mentor actually, said to me, Tash, I think you should do law. I'm like, what? I said, what on earth would make you say that? And she said, "Oh, I've just been watching you. I've been, seeing how passionate you are, an advocate. I would say, just very passionate about causes, particularly conservation and wildlife, and animal welfare. And so, and she put this idea in my head. And at the time I said, no, right? I don't think so. I'm very happy, And I don't know how when people ask me, I don't know how I went from a hell no to registering into law school. The memory is a blur. The memory is a blur. And I think when I registered and I got accepted and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm accepted. And the thing I didn't tell you, Sana, is I actually studied for law school while I was working full time because I couldn't afford, to quit a job and get into law school and study full time. I didn't have the luxury. I was like, well, no, I'm going to keep the full time job, but I'm gonna study part time, and I'm going to do this. And luckily they had schedules for adult learners, of course, 37, right? So they had that schedule, and that's what I did. And every evening I was in law school. I remember I'd finish working and then I would run to class, and 7 to 10, almost every night, and on exam period it was even on the weekends, and it was hectic. It was 4 years of my life. um and of course, through it, you wonder, will I really get through it? And I had a very simple goal, and I was like, I just want to pass. I just want to pass. I'm studying, I'm working, I'm trying to fit in family, and that's how it happened. And when I was in it, and I realized that actually I really like this, and then it gave me an avenue to say, well, maybe I can combine my science and law, right? It happened to be that Singapore was looking for biologists and engineers to retrain as lawyers because they wanted us to help in the commercialization of university research, right? So they needed people who understood the tech, who understood the science to be able to then, do patents and commercialize a lot of the stuff. And so it very naturally happened. And when I graduated, I think I wasn't even on the job market for 3 months, and I got a role, with a very large scientific research organization in Singapore. And that's where it all started. And then it was amazing. And when I look back, I think, Sana, right, how again, right, the universe maybe even conspires through people, through things, through situations and circumstances, because I remember when I was leaving, the conservation space and things stood low, and I was, you feel it, right? You think, oh, will I ever get back, right? Will I ever get back? Because I really loved it. I continued to volunteer, even though I was, doing law, and I was volunteering, and I was, with the Nature Society and a couple of other places, WWF, and so trying to keep the link, but never in a million years would I have thought that, almost 20 years later, I would say, I would come full circle, and be general counsel, which is like, the head of legal for a wildlife organization in Singapore, and not just any wildlife organization, the World Wildlife Fund, which was a dream for the longest time for me. And funny, right? How life brings you back to where you need to be, in a roundabout way almost.
I mean, it is divine intervention.
Yep.
That
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And one thing that I absolutely can connect with, that you already kind of had a knowledge about law, but you just kind of kept it like on the side. But then you didn't. I mean, initially you may have said no to it, but then
Mhm.
your inner self kind of said, just go for it, maybe try it out.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Think sometimes we really, really, we tend to ignore, our conscious self tends to ignore those nudges, but deep down, we yearn for it.
Mm.
Just one opportunity or maybe one calling, something that, and I would say yes to it. I think your friend telling that to you, it was a divine intervention.
It was. And I also think back, Sana, and I think, what if I had said no? Right? What if I had said no? I would have been at that place, so ironic. Well, interestingly, I won't say ironically because they love what they do. As did I. But interestingly, um, everybody that I was with, at that education institute are still there, Sana. They haven't moved on.
Yeah.
They're all still there. And I was like, well, that could have been my life, right? Which would have been fine, but I wouldn't have seen the richness of everything else that there was. And I think maybe sometimes also we get these insights and we think to ourselves, we overthink, right? We overthink the ending. Oh, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? And we don't think about, well, what if this positive thing happens? We think of the negative, right? What if this negative thing happens? And what if this negative thing happens? But what about the positive? What if all this positivity comes from this one decision, right? And I think, just see the one step in front of you. You don't need to see to the end of the road. You don't need to see, to the end of the street. Just see one step in front of you and take that step, right? And at every point, you're just taking little steps, and the pathway clears, and you can see clearer. And if you like what you see, great. And if you don't like what you see, I think that's equally important. If you don't like what you see, what is the harm in turning back? Right? What is the harm in turning back? And I think I shared with you earlier that I was actually doing a PhD, Sana. I had, again, I will say, maybe manifested. It was a goal for me to do a PhD, and I was very specific about the PhD, Sana. I got to tell you, it had to be fully funded. It had to be from a Western institution, but based in Asia, doing Asian wildlife and conservation. You know, it had to be in wildlife and conservation, obviously, right? It had to be like that area. So I had such a detailed an idea, I will call it, okay? Because it wasn't a plan, it was an idea. And I didn't do anything. I didn't actively search it out. I didn't actively, but through the network, of my study and school and things like that, somebody approached me and they're like, Natasha, there's this scholarship from this Australian university to go and do this PhD in Indonesia, and it's on primate reproduction and it's for conservation. I mean, check, Sana. Checked all the boxes, right? And I was so excited. It was fully funded. I would be paid to do this work. It was going to be for conservation. And about 8 months in, Sana, 8 months in, I realized that actually the work, maybe a byproduct would have been for conservation eventually. The real product was actually that they were looking to create bioidentical primates for drug research.
Oh, okay.
And when I found that out, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was devastated. And I was sitting in Indonesia, doing this work, and crying myself to sleep like for 2 weeks in a row, thinking, what am I going to do? This is a fully funded, research opportunity. I've taken this space. I've committed to this people, not with my heart do this work, to get a PhD, because what is the outcome, right? What is my work going to be used for? Right. And how do I call myself a conservationist when, on the other hand, this is what I'm doing, right? It was awful. It was awful. And again, I say, right, divine intervention sometimes, right? And I don't know how, I don't even remember doing this, but apparently when I had accepted, when this professor had reached out to ask me if I wanted this PhD and stuff, I had written an email to him and I had said, yes, I'll take it, provided there's no unethical animal research. The product is going to be used for conservation. Like, I had this list of things I had given him, right? And he's like, yes, don't worry. And I reinforced it and said, well, because it has to be this, Prof. It has to be this. Otherwise, I've got to walk away, right? And I don't even know how I found this email, because I didn't even know I wrote it, Sana. Right? And I found this email and I was like, oh my goodness. Right. And that was my get out of jail card. That was my card. And I made the tough decision to leave, and it absolutely crushed me. But on hindsight, I mean, leaving was the best thing I ever did, because I would have never been able to look at myself or hold myself up to my own standard, right? Of animal welfare and protection and things like this, had I pursued it, even though that was a dream, right? That was the goal, that was a dream. So turning back is also okay, right? You go down a path, you think it's the right one, and when you find that it isn't, why can't you turn back, right?
Such an important question, and that connects with me at so many levels, Natasha. And did he say yes in an email to you?
Yes, he did. He replied and he said, don't worry, Natasha, we're doing conservation stuff, the whole spiel. Of course, because Sana, who in their right mind, minus me, well, I was maybe not in the right mind, you could say, but who in their right mind would give up their entire life, move to Indonesia, be in that situation, in that circumstance, you know nobody, you are working right out in the field, plus in a lab, you know nobody, right? Like who would have done this? And so they were trying to sell it to me. They didn't realize they didn't have to sell too hard because I was ready to pack my bags and move. But I was 25, right? I was ready to take it on and do whatever I was gonna do. And you know, yeah, so he was trying to sell it to me and didn't realize that it would come to this, and didn't think, I think more importantly, Sana, didn't think that I would walk away from a fully funded PhD. How many people do that? Not many.
Yeah,
Not many.
not gonna do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I never thought I would do that, right? So yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And how did that like how did you feel like this, as a part of your identity, like um having this dilemma within you and then making a very hard decision? I mean, did you feel like it's going to take away a chunk of your identity?
At the time, and identity is very interesting. I'm glad you asked that question, Sana, because that was exactly what I asked myself. Who am I? Right? Am I this person who graduates and does this with a PhD and and you fulfill this lifelong dream, and but ultimately again, the point of all of this, Sana, is to do really good research, right? So I also knew, if my goal is to do really good research and do a really good job, the end product of that research is actually then, bioidentical primates for vaccine or drug development or whatever. And was that something I could live with? Right. I think that was it. I was like, well, if you're so successful to do this, which you want to be, right? That's the goal. That's why you do a PhD, right? To be like the expert in that area. Is this really what I want to be known for? Is this really what I want to be known for? And the answer was obvious, right? And I was like, no, how can you call yourself a conservationist? And maybe let me also caveat, right, all of this as a good lawyer does, right? Caveat all of this, right? I have no judgment on how people live their lives, or what they choose to do and how they choose to do, and what they choose to work in, or and you know what I mean. I have no judgment for what people choose, but I do have judgment for what I choose.
Yeah.
Right? I have judgment for what I choose, right? And for me, this was not an option, right? This was non-negotiable. This was not an option. I was okay if somebody else did it, and well, not okay, but you know what I mean, right? That was their decision. That was for them, but I was not okay if I did it, and I think that is when you ask yourself, who am I, right? And I was not that person. I was like, I am not this person to do this, right? And you become very clear, right? You become very clear. And I think it's interesting again, right? Years down the road, and I would have never known that. How would I have known, that 20 years later I would be working for one of the biggest wildlife organizations in the world? How would I know, right? And had I finished that PhD, Sana, and had I wanted to come into this organization, the moment anybody saw what I did, I mean, the moment I would see what I did, I wouldn't have the heart or the I would be so ashamed, almost. I would be so ashamed to put my name in the hat to work in an organization like this, having done the work that I had done. Right? I wouldn't. I wouldn't have been able to live with it. Yeah. Yeah.
Indian people would have the right to judge you.
Yeah, and everybody has a, but I would, again, right? We are our own harshest critics, right? We really are. We really are. And you can't, at the end of the day, I always think, can I sleep at night, right? And what I do, does it allow me to sleep at night, right? If I have, blissful sleep, I know I'm on the right path, right? And I wasn't sleeping very well, obviously, at that time. And I knew why. And I knew why, right? So the decision almost was obvious. Sana, it was hard, but it was obvious, right? So
Oh my goodness. Person connects me with it so many levels because 3 years back,
Mm,
I don't 3 years. I think 2 years back, I also have to make some very, very huge decisions.
mm,
Not at a huge level when you look at a global level, but from a personal point of view,
mhm.
I had to make decisions because when I came across this opportunity
Yeah.
to do something, which allows me the flexibility and the time to give my time, to family.
Mm, mhm.
For the fact that I knew that yes, my parents are aging now. They need care. They need, at least me or maybe my sister to be with them
Yeah.
emotionally, not maybe physically, but at
Mm.
least let me just show up for them at least.
And it's always the daughters, right, Sana? It's always the daughters who feel this pull to look after the parents. Same way. Same way. Yeah.
And I had to, I mean, it was difficult for me, but then I had to at the same time reject some good offers, maybe come.
Mhm,
I was at that juncture where
mhm,
people would say that, okay, it's time for you to grow monetarily or maybe
yeah.
uh, in your career trajectory. But then I had to take that decision. Which one is important for me? Which one makes me fulfilled and
Mhm,
makes me, at least feel that, okay, I'm not lying to myself. This is
mhm,
that I love to do. And at the same time, I'm also getting that opportunity to do that, personally. I always felt like a responsibility out of love and respect for
mhm.
my parents. So I think that's why it connects with me at so many levels.
Yeah, and I did the same thing, right, Sana? I moved back to be closer to my parents as well. Have made a lot of choices, and again, right? Can we sleep at night, Sana? And we know, right? We know that that decision allows us to sleep at night, right? So
Mm, sure.
yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Okay. Uh, but moving on, Natasha. Like, let's talk about you are now General Counsel at the WWF Singapore, and you are also leading their digital transformation.
hmm
Um, a lot of conservation people they romanticize, boots on the ground, kind of
yeah,
distrusting tech.
yeah,
But you have implemented AI workflows, CLM systems in pharma and academia before.
yes.
What's the biggest resistance that you're meeting inside WWF when you talk about bringing legal tech into a 60-year-old conservation organization?
Yeah. So, I think as with any tech, Sana, there is fear because people don't understand, right?
Mm.
I think the biggest misconception right now is, everyone's like, oh, it's going to take my job. It's going to replace my job. It's going to, but we fail to see that we're not at the level of tech and AI replacing us at all. We still need to be what I hear and what I like to call human in the loop, right? We still need people to check and to verify and to start, some of the workflows and complete the workflows and things like that. And I think for WWF, again, conservation, very, very traditional organization. I think we were blessed that the leadership in what I call HQ, right? So we're an organization with multiple WWF organizations around the world. And the HQ level made a decision and said, we're going to get these tools, they moved their entire workspace system to Microsoft, right, to the MS system. They had a massive change, preparing people, right, just to get structured and upskill some of their people. And I think I came in at the right time because they were already doing all of that. And I could just ride that wave, and I could say, "Hey, I've got something that I can do with you guys." And I think actually, funnily enough, I think they were doing this transition for Singapore, I think in June or something, and I must have joined them as a volunteer initially in January, and just watching the organization and seeing what I could do. And then from the moment they started this transition, that's when I started, the transformation projects, the legal as well, and we were one of the first projects, transformation projects in the organization in Singapore. So in a way, I had a head start. In a way, also, the legal team was just me, Sana. It was just me, and I had, stakeholders who were sending us the contracts and who were sending us, advisories and things like that. And so I think in a way it helped that it was just me, and I was able to one-on-one connect with the stakeholders, with the requesters, and everybody's keen to get work done. And if you can help them do it faster, bigger, better, they're grateful, right? So I think I had the first mover advantage almost. They saw this thing, they're like, oh, how are we gonna use it? And then we just did a lot of training, I would say, just training, just doing user surveys, getting their inputs, really designing the workflows and the tools around what they needed, right? I think a lot of people make a mistake where they just say, oh, I've seen XYZ tool. We're going to get it and implement it in the organization. But the reality is that, is that tool right for you, right? Is that right for your organization? How are you guys working? Is this going to help you, or is this going to hinder you, or is this going to make work like twice as hard? Because it's not even about the tech, right, Sana? It's about, how are you guys working now? Right. And what can you do to be better? And then when you see what you can do to be better, what then comes into play, right? What do you need to take it to the next level? I think people don't work from that ground up in stages. They buy this shiny tool and then they try to work backwards, right? And that's why a lot of tech fails, I would say. That's why a lot of I would say transformations fail, because you're working top down instead of ground up, right?
Yeah. It's like the fear, the FOMO.
Yes, yes.
That you'll miss out on jumping onto the AI bandwagon and everything. So take everything which there's dot AI or dot.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, for all the hype as well, right, Sana? I think I can't blame organizations as well, because I would say, the vendors, right, the digital tech vendors, and all of these tools that are coming out as well. I mean, you have a part to play too, right? I mean, you need to train your people better, because when you're reaching out to customers to try the tool, I mean, try to understand what is their need, right? Don't try to push the solution. Try to understand what's their need, right? So I had an organization that had no lawyers in their group. They thought that, this tool that was sold to them, they were promised that, this is all the bells and whistles. You don't need a lawyer. You can just have somebody, plug it in and it's plug and play, and, all of this thing. $50,000 tool, Sana, with no lawyers in the loop, and promising that the organization would figure it out and this tool would help them. And luckily, I saw this, and I stepped in very quickly, and I'm like, no, there is no way that you can do this without somebody who knows what they're doing, right? This is not an accurate promise, right? This is not the right thing to do. And I feel really sorry, because this was a nonprofit as well, Sana. This was a nonprofit who was going to spend $50,000 on a tool that would have absolutely been the wrong tool for the organization. And then it would have ended up as a white elephant, and worse, the organization would have said, oh, legal tech doesn't work. We tried it. It didn't work, and so it's sad, right? It's sad when I see things like that, because I think we all need to get more responsible as well. Yeah, yeah.
Um, and um, you know, when someone says, but Natasha, we are here to save animals, not spreadsheets or not tech. Like, how do you answer in the moment without sounding like this? Because people have this misconception whenever there is some advanced tech moving into this nonprofit or this ethical sphere, that there is some kind of corporate villain walking into the jungle and destroying everything.
Mm, 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 mm. It's hard. It's hard. But I also say, at the end of the day, especially for all companies, let alone nonprofit, Sana, um, making the dollar, whether it is, raising money from a customer, whether it's raising money from a donor, making that dollar is getting harder and harder, because there are more people in the space. Competition is larger than ever. I think everybody and their neighbor is started a business, in a business, right? Everybody um, uh, is really competing for that dollar. right? And how do you then get that dollar, right? And how do you get that dollar more efficiently, right? And as with every organization, the highest cost of any organization is manpower,
Yep.
right? It's manpower. You hire 10 people because you need 10 people to do the work, right?
Mm.
But you need 10 people to maybe do work if at a very high super skill level, fair enough. But sometimes, even the routine work, right? Can we see how we use tech to free up our time, right? To free up our time. So you take away the mundane work, because everybody has mundane work, right? We all do routine work that we can't stand. Submitting claims, for example, horrible, hate it. We all have mundane work that we do. What if that tech can help take away that mundane work so that we can focus on higher value work, right? I think that is the sell, right? That we're not here to replace people. We're here to give you back your time so that you can spend it doing, more meaningful work. Work shorter. I'm a huge fan of the 4-day week, Sana. I think with tech we can even probably move it to a 3-day week. How awesome is that? That we only work 3 days and we get to relax for 4 days. But we can, right? We can if we outsource a lot of this mundane work. Um, uh, and I think, for nonprofits especially, right? A lot of stuff, a lot of what we've done has been very manual, right? Has been very, very manual, right? It's getting harder to attract people to the profession as well, right? As people look to start their own businesses and do their own thing, it's harder to do all of this. And so we especially nonprofits, I think, have to think about what do we need to change, right? We need to change the way we work. We need to stretch that dollar. And it really needs to go to the ground, right? We can't be spending all that money on a ton of people, a ton of, it needs to go to the ground where they need the money, right? So I think especially for nonprofits, it makes sense, you know?
It does. And I also think, just, leaving aside the numbers and
Mm,
source and outputs, I think it's more about the intention,
mm,
you know, how aligned you are. Because something which personally I believe is whether you work from office or from home or 4 days,
mm,
3 days, or even, if somebody's asking or expecting that you have to work 7 days, 24 hours.
mm,
Depends on the intention, because I was just going through very recently this, a founder, he had put up an article, uh, taking some 100 or more than that interviews, and
yes.
he actually observed something that, when people are kind of given the flexibility and freedom
Mm-hmm.
in optimized extent, they are creative. They can come up with some great solutions, or at least, like, they can identify problems, work around challenges in much better way. So
Absolutely.
that's,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing that we don't think about tech, I mean, let's move away from the very sophisticated tools and all of this, right? Even this Zoom call, Sana, this
Mm.
is tech,
Yeah.
right? This is where on earth in 20 years ago would you and I be able to be on this interview, sitting in India, sitting in Singapore, having a wonderful conversation? How, right? The tech has enabled us to do this, has saved us airfare, has saved me renting hotels, has saved you renting a studio, right? And you're delivering this experience, right? It is democratized work as we know it for a lot of people, and I think especially for mothers, right, who take a break, do childcare, come back, want to get back into the workforce, or want to continue to look after their children while they're working. Tech has enabled us to be able to be based from home, right? It has enabled mothers to be able to continue to care for their children, and to fathers as well now, and or loved ones or family and caregiving, and and people maybe even with a disability, right, Sarah, who maybe traditionally, couldn't catch a train or a bus or whatever to go to work. They can now work from home. I mean, we fail to see that tech is just not the sophisticated stuff, right? It's the simple everyday stuff, like a Zoom call, like being able to be in a meeting, miles away and still getting work done, right? It's amazing.
It is. It is. And I know the time is constrained, but before we wrap up, I think this is something very important, a very important part of your work. You founded Legal Ease on the belief that small nonprofits deserve senior legal support
Yeah.
without the full-time price tag.
Yes.
That
Yes. And
is, uh-huh. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I said not just nonprofits, even startups, right? When I mentioned that everybody's trying to start their business or in their business or I just saw small businesses struggling, right?
Mm,
Guessing when they were signing, contracts, not really knowing what they signed, getting into trouble because they didn't read the fine print, and you hear it a lot, right? A lot of small claims and things like that. And for small businesses, Sana, you know, every bit of money coming in helps, right? When you're starting, you need to make sure that you've got cash flow, right? You cannot have, a ledger full of debt, more than 60 days because you run on cash flow, right? And that's what I was seeing, right? And I was really quite upset about it, and I thought, what can we do differently? And coincidentally, at that time, I again decided for the second time to move back to where my parents were. And work wouldn't give me the flexibility to be based from home, right? And they were like, nope, we still needed to come into the office 5 days a week, even though I had built the entire team, Sana, remote, right? Which is ironic. Now that is really ironic. Built the whole team remote, but they're like, nope, we needed to come in 5 days a week, and I wasn't able to, and I said, no, this is going to be too much of a strain on the health, on taking care of the parents and all of this, and I thought to myself, well, what can I do differently? How can I still help? How can I still stay in law? How can I still contribute? And this idea came to me, and then what was interesting, Sana, was that I met other lawyers who were in the same season of life, right? Either had healthcare issues, either had parents with healthcare issues, children, child rearing duties for myriad of reasons, wanted to step off the treadmill as well, right? And I was able to hire a couple of them as consultants to work with me to co-deliver the services. And for varying reasons, they decided to step off, and then it became, almost like a movement. For us to be able to, step in when they needed to step away, right? We would go to organizations and we say, if your people need to step away, because what happens, right? Somebody steps out of work, the colleagues then take on the workload. Everybody's stretched, you resent the person who had to step away, even though that poor person probably needs a break for whatever reason, medical, hospital, and we said, let us help you plug the gap, right? Let us help you plug the gap. We're not going to be, exorbitant, big, low pricing. We're going to be affordable. We're going to be flexible. We're going to try to be agile and approachable, right? We're going to be customer first. And that got traction, Sana, because I think, lawyers come across as very scary, maybe in a summary, I would say, right? People are intimidated, right? Sitting across the room or talking to or even thinking to approach, a lawyer. And we just wanted to be different, right? We just wanted to be approachable and accessible, I think. And it worked out, right? It worked out.
That is actually, it kind of flips the entire narratives, especially um, the legal or the legality part of it, and also one particular thing that specifically around fractional arrangements.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this argument or this thought that fractional arrangements can sometimes mean that the GC doesn't have the same skin in the game as someone whose only job or full-time job is this only. How do you defend the model when people worry it's legal support light?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, that's a really good question, Sana, and a lot of people, a lot of clients, I think, in the beginning, when I spoke to them about this, had the same reservation, right? Like, but I said, look, guys, let's be honest, right? Everybody thinks they need, the bells and whistles, and you need, the top lawyer to help you, all the time and things. But as a startup, as a nonprofit, do you really get the volume of work that you need to be able to afford this person, right? That's the first question, right? Can you afford a person at this seniority, right? And what is going to make them affordable, right? 1 day a week, 2 day a week, 3 day a week, right? A fraction of a full time makes them affordable, right? And then you also have this the second layer, right? That who are the type of people who do this fractional work, Sana? These are people who have caregiving responsibilities, who maybe just choose this as a season of life. That they made a conscious choice to do this. And because they make a conscious choice to do this, I find, especially the people that I employ to help me and with myself, right? Because we make a conscious choice to do this, we're very determined to make it work, right? We're very determined to make it work. And so at every point, we're checking in with the client, where we're checking in to see, how we're doing, what we're doing. Is the support enough? Is all of this? And I think that two-way feedback is necessary. And I'm very happy to say that, in my experience over the last 2 years delivering work this way, we have a very high client satisfaction rate, a lot of repeat clients, a lot of referrals. I think that's the best metrics, right? When you get referrals from very happy clients who refer you to other clients, and they see the value, right? They just see the value, and I think there's nothing to convince. We just show them. We have a reputation now. It's hard, of course, when you start. You have nothing to back you up, right? But I'm very good about. Somebody told me early, right? They're like, okay, well, use LinkedIn a lot. Get a lot of referrals. Get your clients to give you, good referrals, and put it in a public space somewhere like LinkedIn, right? Which is very business focused, Sana. And so I think that's another thing I did well. I learned how to be visible on LinkedIn early, and use that as a medium, because I don't pay for advertising. I don't think I will. All my clients are inbound or referrals. And I say because of that platform. I would say LinkedIn is a platform for work. And when people see that you're doing good work, and people are recommending you, and things like that, that's uh that just churns. That just helps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's 100%, I mean, 1000% true.
Mhm.
Because we have, like, organically identified that, yes, this is a person or this particular um, organization or their work, it has definitely value. And
Mhm.
we are going to be, or, like the marketers would call it, the brand ad.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's something also very I know a lot of people are afraid to show up on LinkedIn or social media or something, but there's something also almost endearing, I would say, when I see somebody on social media, and you see them a couple of times, and see what they're doing, and you get feedback and things like that. There's that person grows on you, right? You feel like you know them. You see the conversations, and what they're doing and what they're saying and stuff like that, and it almost feels like, oh, I know a friend. So it's interesting, right? I think social media is very interesting from that perspective, and your podcast does the same. Sana builds trust. You have great guests. You're a great interviewer, and yeah, and you build trust, right? And I think that really is the currency of business, trust.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So, Natasha, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect with you, they would like to share their thoughts and also explore more around the work that you do, what would be the best medium to connect?
Okay, well, I have a website. I just launched it yesterday, and I'm super proud of it because it only took me about 3 months to get up. But I'm on www.legalease, LEGALEASE, legalease, .sg. And you can reach out to me on LinkedIn as well, Natasha Raina, on LinkedIn, and email, I guess, Natasha at legalease.sg.
Wonderful. Listeners, what I'm going to do for all of you is have all these links and details in the show notes. So just refer to them along with this episode on whichever platform you listen to your podcast to. And um, I think, listeners, exploring Natasha's journey, I think maybe this is what I feel. Maybe um, this is how or what rewriting your life actually is. Not erasing or eroding the old path,
Mhm.
just being brave enough to be the first one to walk it again when the forest needs it. So, Rasha, thank you so much. I mean, this conversation connected with me at so many levels, and I'm very sure listeners are also going to, have some kind of, nudge to do a bit of self introspection after.
Oh, thank you, Sana. It was a pleasure talking to you. And loved the interview. Loved everything we've discussed. Haven't thought about a lot of things until you raised the questions today, actually. So thank you. You brought back a lot of good memories.
Oh my goodness. I really feel so much good right now. And listeners, thank you so much for devoting your time to tune in to this episode of BizBlend. And if today's conversation has stirred something within you, connect with Natasha, reach out to her directly, explore legalese. And if you are enjoying BizBlend, please share this episode with one person who needs that permission to change direction. Until next time, keep blending. I'm Sana and this was BizBlend. Thank you.